Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome to the control video. I'm going to go over my controls and sort of how I play World of Warcraft, talking about various things from accessibility to input efficiency. However, don't skip this part. This is for everyone. The only thing I care about when it comes to your controls is that it does not hurt you, right? I'm talking about comfortable ergonomics. So if you're doing an input and it's strenuous, or you have to stretch a little too far and it can hurt after a while, we need to find a new input for that. It's just, I got tendonitis from playing competitive Smash Brothers and writing my thesis. And I wish I took a little bit better care of my hands back then and my posture and positioning and whatnot, because that stuff can affect you for life. And so that's my big, like, disclaimers. I want to make sure you all remember that. You might see a crazy input that I go for. If that's uncomfortable for you, don't do it. Now, you also might see my inputs and go, what's going on here? So in terms of how I play the game, you already saw the keyboard if you looked at the thumbnail. It's a totally custom keyboard, all lube switches. I've balanced the stabilizers, lubed the stabilizer housings. You guess it. It's just a fully kitted out keyboard. You do not need this to play World of Warcraft. My only suggestion for you for keyboards is make sure it has an anti-ghosting feature, which is pretty typical these days in most, even like $20 keyboards. And it's just that it allows you to have multiple inputs pressed and it won't drop an input on you. That's really important. And for my mouse, I have two mouse side buttons. That's sort of my only request. If you use an MMO mouse, that's great with all 12 of the side buttons, but I use a mouse with a middle mouse click, two little function buttons under that middle mouse, and then more importantly, mouse 4 and 5 on the side. So I remap mouse 4 and 5 to control and shift, which might be why some of you go, how do you hit control 1 for disintegrate? I'm using my right hand to press control and then my left hand to hit disintegrate on number 1. And so it does make this make maybe a little more sense. The only keys I typically use are 1 through 5, Q, E, and R, F and G, Z, X, C, and V, tab, obviously, spacebar for jump, and then WASD for movement. And I do use back pedal quite a bit. Now, all those buttons, now you can assume I have a control and a shift version of, and that's where I get all my inputs. This works out really, really well for me because I don't have to move a lot to have access to a ton of buttons, and I can sort of have a logic to things, right? On Mistweaver, I tend to have my AoE buttons on 4, or I tend to have my single target stuff on 1 and 2. For Evoker, we ended up learning this class with these 4 abilities, and then when you get access to Devastation and Preservation, it changes up the rest of your buttons. So I kept the 4 core abilities here, and then moves that they shared, like tip the scales, would end up here, and then everything else is sort of custom based on the class and how I learn it. So common buttons, though, that I use for lots of functions are X and C tend to be my crowd control, and then like control C is another crowd control, and that's just so that they're all there. When I'm playing priest, which I don't play very often, I know that C is my crowd control button, and then I'll be like, all right, it's psychic scream, and right, like just because I put it on C. I always put my movement ability on V. My friend suggested it when I first started playing WoW. You've probably seen him in my videos, 40 Bass or Furbos, Fur War, etc. Huge shout outs to him. It sticks around with me forever. And then the rest of these are all comfort. Middle mouse, something I can quickly get to that I'm not going to accidentally press. R is your ultimate in League of Legends and reload and a shooter. So like, I like having nice important buttons here that I need to press quickly, but that I'm not necessarily going to fat finger while I'm running around. And then you'll notice that there's a few down here with no button. And that's because I don't feel like I need a button for Blessing of Bronze. So that sort of frees up a slot. I'd like to manually click on Lust because I don't ever want to fat finger Lust and ruin the party. That's a little more dangerous, but I found that as a healer, it's not too hard to do and set up. And then my defensive is always Shift F. My other defensive will always be Shift middle mouse. And then my kick is always Shift E. Because my pinky naturally lies on the shift button, it allows me to very easily hit things like Shift R. So if I want to do instant fire blast, I can Shift R, Control 2. And because I'm using my mouse for that, it's a very quick and painless input, which is really nice. So Shift E is, you know, just moving my index finger up from D to E, and that allows me to kick very quickly. I like having that stuff on standby that I can press very quickly and efficiently. That's in the same spot for every class so that it's not a part of a rotation or anything. And helps me out a ton. Emergency buttons, I like to keep them on shift 2, 3, and 4. If I don't have a dispel, because dispel is almost always shift 1 for me, I'll put something else utility here for DPS classes, right? These will usually be damage cooldowns. And then G is my secondary dispel, cauterizing flame. You know, honestly, I don't know how it ended up here, but I find it really nice. It's out of the way enough, but easy enough to hit. What more do I need to say? Z is usually things I need to use, but often I want to set up or really line up or think about, or press very deliberately without accidentally fat fingering. So I actually have Storm, Earth, and Fire on Z for Mistweaver. I have my, what's it called? Seraphim on Paladin on Z, and I have my Deep Breath on Z, and it's just, honestly, it works out pretty well for me. I can hit it pretty quickly and set it up, but it's out of the way so I don't accidentally press it. Now, all this aside, right, let's talk optimizations. So the first optimization I want to come to is mouse over casting. I'll have some gameplay footage on screen, but essentially extra inputs are bad if they take up time. So a good example of this is Super Smash Bros. Melee. If you press L or R right before hitting the floor, you'll cancel your move's aerial lag. This becomes second nature and a really fast input. And while it is an extra input, you know, that you're doing all the time, it doesn't really get in the way of the flow of the game. Whereas manually clicking on someone will take time, and your brain has to register, okay, did I click on them? I clicked on them. Okay, now I can press the button. If you go too quickly, you could fat finger and press a heal or a big cooldown on the wrong target. And that's not the sort of thing you want to have happen. Mouse over takes a little bit of getting used to, and you might prefer it with, say, Healbot, where mouse over only really works on the mouse over Healbot frames, but ultimately it's a standard built-in setting in the game. It's very much worth learning how to use. And I'm telling you, like an hour or two practicing with it, you'll be getting used to it. Within a week, you'll be using it second nature, and after a month, you'll have forgotten that you used to play another way. It's that important to playing quickly, and I highly recommend it. I also don't recommend, and there's a huge asterisk after all of this, by the way, that you click cast. Click casting is great if you're being lazy and you got like a snack in one hand and you want to just run around and do some questing and blast some mobs. You can click cast, but for content like Mythic Plus or Raid, I really don't recommend it. It's almost always going to be slower than using buttons. Now, here's my disclaimer. If you have accessibility needs and click casting is your only method of making stuff work for you, then I highly recommend, with whatever buttons that you can use, try to set them up to optimize target priorities, or target selection rather, and modifiers, so that you can do more with the inputs you have, right? So if you can use, say, your right hand on a mouse, and you can use Control and Shift remapped to the side of it, and let's say you only have 3 buttons you can easily hit, well, now you just made 9 buttons because you have those 3 buttons. Then you have Control in those 3 buttons and Shift in those 3 buttons. And if you want to get really fancy, I think you can set up Control Shift ones, so you can have up to 12. So we just made 3 inputs turn into 12 inputs. And if you can do anything like that, that's good. If you can only have a couple of buttons at your disposal, maybe set them to target your teammates, and then you can use tab to target enemies. Accessibility is a really tough subject because there are so many different kinds of accessibility that you need to account for, but whatever can speed up your gameplay and quickly picking targets is what you need, right? You need to be able to move, you need to be able to pick targets, and you need to be able to cast. If you can speed up any of those categories to make up for like a speed deficiency due to accessibility needs, you should. Also, if anybody knows of an application that lets us set up snapping points for a mouse, I would love to know about that. I've met a few players that have tremors, and I've always wanted to know, is there like an application that lets us set up snapping points so that they could be shaking a little bit, but when they hover a spot, it'll snap to that point and require a more deliberate force to move off of that point. If any of you have ever used a mouse on an iPad, similar to the way it feels to snap to icons there, that would be awesome, because that's something I've always wanted to have for players. But yeah, it's all a lot about efficiency and speeding up any process you can. Now, I use default frames right now, right? I use a few add-ons like Omni CD to track cooldowns, but realistically, this is mouse over casting default inside the game, and this is raid frames with in-game options. And I go over that in my interface video if you want to check any of that out. but you don't need a crazy fancy setup to do a lot of the stuff. Whatever works for you. If you find the more information from certain add-ons is better for you, go for it. If you find that a fully weak aura'd interface like some players have helps you better track your cooldowns and whatnot, yeah, go for it. All of that stuff will make you a better player in the long run if you're comfortable using it. So again, play to your comfort and play to your strengths. If you have weaknesses, there's probably add-ons and accessibility features that can help you overcome those weaknesses. And get into the discussion down below, right? Talk about it. If you have a specific need for a use case in WoW and you're like, oh man, I really wish I had a way to do this, somebody probably knows a way. Let's have a conversation downstairs about this. I say downstairs, the comment section, and let's have a chat. I would love to get an accessibility list together, and then I don't know, I would love to make a video that just goes over accessibility options for WoW players, because I think it'd be really cool to have a nice resource for players to go to find that sort of thing. And in general, for the content on the channel, I do want to ask all of you, do you want to see more gameplay videos of like me just playing the game, some commentary, or maybe some off the cuff me talking while playing? I don't want to just play preservation all the time. I do like dabbling in other classes. I do like just healing random keys and having fun on preservation. If that's the kind of stuff you want to see, let me know down below, because I've been in the mood to do some more commentary of some gameplay, not necessarily hardcore tutorials, but just trying to give you an insight into how I play. Let me know, and I will see you all in the next one. Take care, friends.